Today we're going to be talking about triple drive with extra steps. That's right, it's Dragonic Overlord. The philosophy of the deck is to be as aggressive as possible. Typically, this deck is going to take large amounts of damage to clap back with powerful effects. A big problem with building this deck is that there aren't enough cards to directly support the archetype, but this also means deck building is pretty open. This build leans more towards the default Overlord support. However, I'll also include an Overdress list for Overlord at the end of the video. So here we go. Nehalem is an awkward numbers button, and it's the reason the deck is so costly on Soul Blast. Every Overlord deck runs 4 to hit over a 5k guard value. You get one for free from your ride line, but it's liable to get retired, so do keep more in hand when you see them. Tensha, Stead, and Gojo are 2 cards that can be uniquely taken advantage of in Overlord. This build leans aggressive, so we run 4 Tensha, Stead, and 2 Gojo. Tensha Stead lets you search your persona ride. This means that when you see a Tensha Stead in your opening hand, you can get away with putting your Overlords back in the deck during Mulligan for more aggro pieces. 2 cards that contribute to the aggro playstyle are Berserk Dragon, who gives himself 5k while keeping your opponent's board down, and my special tech, Hungersaurus. This unit gains 5k on attack, but is forced to attack front row rear guards if it can. Now, if you remember Overlord skill, your opponent is strongly discouraged from calling rear guards. This card lets you punish opponents who try to play around Overlord skill. It can also bait your opponents into playing rear guards to set up Overlord skill. It's not the best overall card for the deck, but it does fit nicely into its needed role, so I run 2. It pays to mention here about what you should search off the Overlord ride line. There are 2 options, a PG or an aggro piece. Typically, adding your aggro pieces is good against matchups like Bruce, Barrow, or any matchup you think you can just rush down. I recommend searching Tensha, Stead, or Bahr in these cases. In other cases, I'd search a PG. Typically in this deck, you want to keep your grade 2s and access to your persona ride. The deck is very aggressive and you should mulligan as such. Togachirashi is an interesting case for mulligans. It's never bad when you see it, but it's also not always needed. Keep it 100% of the time if you have a Nehalem in hand, but don't be afraid to put it back if you need to dig for better pieces. Keep other grade 1s when it's maximum aggression time for decks like Bruce. Keep PGs for more tempo-oriented games like against Orphis. Don't be afraid to keep some triggers in hand for defense against matchups like Magnolia. It's not always worth seeing combo pieces if you've lost the game. Your worst matchups are Seraph Snow, Bahr Magnus, Bastion, and Bruce. Seraph Snow's prison mechanic drains through your resources quickly, and it's a major problem for the deck. You want to keep cards like Togachirashi and put back Nehalem for this matchup. Turbo 15 Bahr Magnus is a deck that can punish you for developing board and rush you while doing it. There's not a lot you can do that race them. You gotta be as aggressive as possible in this matchup. You're trying to force them to guard with cards they need to hit 15 in soul. Bruce is an unfortunate matchup. You should have advantage against them as you are an aggro deck, but Bruce is just too good to really dominate the deck completely. The goal is to out-aggro the deck and make them drop as many as combo pieces as possible from hand, similar to what you do against Turbo 15 Bahr Magnus. The deck's got solid power. It gets what is basically 3.5 attacks per turn. It's got decent numbers, but it lacks truly high numbers like Zorga, so I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5 on power. The deck's got okay control. Overlord's playstyle has a unique effect on how an opponent wants to play rear guards. The deck can take advantage of this. I'm going to give it a generous 3 out of 5 for control, also kind of based off of cards such as Berserk Dragon. The deck's consistency is very solid. It's really not going to brick a lot, and you can see your persona rides constantly, as well as choosing a grade 1 to search. But as an aggro deck, you want to see the right pieces, and that's not always guaranteed to see a lot of them, so I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I give the deck a 2 out of 5 on versatility. It's got 2 modes, aggro and slower aggro. I'm going to give it a very boosted 2 out of 5 on value. The deck has a non-guaranteed triple drive that you have to discard and counterblast for. The deck is very heavily reliant on counterblast and needs a lot of soul blast for Nehalem. Overall, Dragonic Overlord is one of my favorite casual decks for Overdress. If it had just a bit more, it could do very well against the meta decks, but as of right now, it's a bit behind. Before we go, here's my Overdress deck list for Overlord. The deck hits a bit harder and can get a bit more value from cards like Varina Arcs, but the big problem with this build is that it's not as consistent, and I really can't justify running this one over the other one. You can tech the order that discards Overdress units to draw 2. However, I think this list is just fine as it is. Thanks for watching. I hope you all will stay tuned for our upcoming lyrical deck list. We're trying to have all of them done around the time of the set's release, so please subscribe if you want to see that. More premium content coming up as well in the future. See you then.